Hello everyone, my name is Osama Haggag. I'm a contributor on Duolingo for the English for Arabic Speakers course. I would like to give you a small presentation about what Arabic is. I'll give you a gentle introduction to the language. Basically, as an Arabic person, Arabic Egyptian person living abroad, I've found that there's always such a lack of information about what Arabic is as a language. And I would like to perhaps guide you through the language or some characteristics of it. So basically, by the end of this presentation, I hope to have answered these 5 questions. Basically what Arabic is, how old is it, and what's cool and different about it, and how is it similar to other languages, and how could you learn Arabic? So let me start by the first question, which is, what is Arabic? So Arabic is a living Semitic language alongside Hebrew and Aramaic. It's one of the 6 official languages of the UN, alongside English, French, Spanish, Chinese, and Russian. It's the mother tongue to over 400 million people living in the world, and it's also the religious language of 1.5 billion Muslims around the world. And I'll speak about that more later. Basically, Arabic is a diglossic language. This means that there are 2 branches of the language, basically the spoken branch and the written branch. We have about 8 broad dialect groups. The most known ones are the Egyptian one in Egypt, Levantine in Syria and Lebanon, Gulf in the eastern part of the Middle East or the Arab world, North African, Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco. And this is a very unfair generalization because there are many more dialects and variants of dialects as well. But anyway, what all of these have in common is that they all share a single written form, which is the modern standard Arabic. This is the official form of Arabic, and it's the written one. It's basically used in official documents, newspapers, news, literature. It's the variant used in Duolingo as well, and more on the written variant. So using this thing, basically, some guy in Kuwait can read the Tunisian newspaper and understand it, and some guy in Morocco could read an Egyptian novel and understand it because they're all written in the same form. So what is actually the differences between the dialects of the language? Well, this will sound weird because I am Egyptian and I can only speak the Egyptian dialect. I'll try to imitate the other ones, and I understand all of these will sound really silly to you anyway if you don't know Arabic, so I will try. So basically, in literary Arabic, the modern standard Arabic, to say I love reading a lot, you would say أنا أحب القراءة كثيرا. This is what you would say. أنا أحب القراءة كثيرا. In Egyptian, we would say أنا بحب القراية أوي. So here we can say, actually, we can see that there's some kind of similarity, some kind of branching. Instead of قراءة, we say القراية, which is kind of similar. Instead of كثيرا, we have a different word for very or a lot, which is أوي in Egypt. In Tunisia, they would say, for example, إنا نحب القراية برشا, which I understand it sounds weird, but trust me, it is kind of similar. The dialects are similar to each other, and they're all kind of similar to the standard Arabic as well. In Lebanon, they would say كتير بحب القراية. I think it would sound like that. So yeah, this basically is my point, that they are kind of similar. There is something in common between them. So, how old is the language actually? The earliest known example that we have of the language dates back to the 4th century, like the current, the standard Arabic basically. It was an inscription found in the Syrian desert. Basically, the tribes living at that time, in the pre-Islamic era, had an oral poetic tradition. They really loved oral poetry so much that actually they wanted to share it with each other, and because of that, they developed some kind of elevated style of the language that had no written rules, but it had some kind of rules. So all these tribes living in the desert, actually, they had their own dialects and cultures and yeah, their own kind of life, but they were connected together through the love of poetry and oral poetry, basically the language. It wasn't until the 8th century, till a Persian guy called Sibawayh, he wrote the first grammar book about Arabic. He was a Persian that learned Arabic as a foreign language, and what he did was basically just read so much poetry that he saw patterns in them, the rules, he saw the rules of the patterns of the rules, and then he said, okay, so this is like that because of that, and basically he wrote the rules and justified them with quotes from poetry. So, which brings me to the Islam kind of point. So basically, the tribes valued the poetic usage of the language, which in turn leads us to the miracle of the Quran. Because Quran at that time was so poetically superior to these people really proud of their language, and they thought they were the best at it. And then came this book, and it was better than anything they have ever written. And to them at the time, this was a sign that this book has to be of divine origin. It's so incredible. No human could have ever written this. So this started the coupling between the language and the religion. Basically, because the book is so poetically superior, so its miracle is kind of linguistic. That's why it has been tied to the language as well. And because of that, actually, you can read books from the 8th century because it's still the same language. It's basically preserved from that time till now. It's the same one we learn at schools. Of course, it's a little different. Some expressions are more complicated. Some words we don't use that much, but it's still the same language. We can understand it. This actually brings me to the point of also the 1.5 billion Muslims around the world. Because of how the book is poetically superior, well, let's put it that way. If I tell you that, like, the best poetry book in human history is written in Spanish, you could, of course, read a translation and understand it, but you won't really appreciate the beauty, the intricacy of the language unless you know Spanish. So it's basically the same thing. So if I tell you that this great poetry book is actually holy and it's from God, that's why it's really important for Muslims to learn Arabic, to understand the book natively, so that they will appreciate the beauty of the book and the miracle of it. So that was the history part. Now begins the interesting stuff. So what's so cool about Arabic anyway? And why is it, like, what's characteristic of it? I would like to talk about that in two branches, basically visually and grammatically. Let's start with visually because it's the cooler thing. So Arabic is a right-to-left language, and the letters are almost always connected, which makes for great calligraphy. Arabic calligraphy is one of the most beautiful arts on this planet. I'm biased, but I really love it. So here I have an example of the phrase Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, which means in the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, which is basically said at the beginning of each chapter, not chapter, but at the beginning of each story in the Quran, basically. So here you can see, like, this is the actual thing, how we would write it very normally, and this is the calligraphy version of it. And you can see how kind of twisty and artistic it is. There's a kind of beauty to putting the lines together. And this is actually one of the simple ones because you can tell the letters and the words apart. I have an example on the next slide, basically the same sentence, but in so many different styles that it's just beautiful. So on the left side, this is not the same as before, but like the most similar one to it. Here we can see an artist using colors to play with the sentence a little bit, and it looks really nice. The one to the right of it, the artist makes use of symmetry, the fact that some letters exist in words in the same position, and uses that to make this kind of symmetrical, beautiful figure. On the rightmost side, we have the artist giving the same thing in the shape of a fruit, a pear, and the leaves are also some kind of sentence, which I don't understand, so this is, I can't really read that. Okay, this is really good, this is really good calligraphy. Another example as well is not so religiously based. This is more propaganda-like. Basically, this says that Mahmud Khan, son of Abdul Hamid, is forever victorious. This was an emperor of the Ottoman Empire in the 18th century, I believe. And here you can see that in this animation, you can, if I color them, you will see the different components. But as a native, I would have never figured out what the sentence means because it's not a book that you read. It's just art that you appreciate. Sorry. So that was visually. Now I would like to talk a little bit about the grammar. So what's cool about Arabic is the root pattern system. All languages have a root pattern system, but Arabic really relies on that a lot. What we basically have is that every verb has a root, which is usually 3 to 4 letters. And there are patterns upon which you apply this root to come up with predictable meanings, almost always. So here, for example, the verb to write, kataba, K-T-B. If we apply the root to any of these patterns, like we will put the root in place of the dashes, we will get an almost certain meaning. So, for example, if we apply to the second one, which is dash AA dash I dash, we will put the KTB here. This will become KAATIB. Katib. This means writer. If you would have used another verb like to eat, akala, this would have been akil, which means eater. So this is what I mean. There are these patterns upon which you can apply the root to come up with a predictable meaning, and you don't have to know these by heart. Well, you do eventually, but you can kind of conjugate them on the fly, or like come up with them on the fly. That's the only cool thing about Arabic. No, well, that's one of the cool things about it. Basically, also Arabic has broken plurals. There are patterns for that, but they're not so set in stone. They're not so predictable. For example, here the first one, the plural of book. Book means kitab, which actually also kind of related to kataba. the plural of it is kutub, but this is not like a standard form. It's just these things you have to know by heart, sadly. We also do have the feminine plural. Basically, Arabic is a gendered language, so everything has a gender. And even when talking about things in plural, we have genders for that. There exists a form to talk about a group of ladies rather than a group of men. There exists a set of conjugations for that. Also, all the non-human plurals are feminine singulars. So to say something like that, like the book, they are green, you would say the books, she is green. That's the literal translation of it in Arabic. We also have a dual form, and as I've been informed, so does Hebrew. There exists a form for talking about two of something, two people walking down a street. There exists a certain conjugation set of rules for that. Which brings me to the topic of numbers. We actually use we call it the Hindi numeral system, which is these numbers, and we write them left to right, as opposed to the right to left direction of the language. And we don't use the currently named Arabic numbers, which is a little strange, but we don't. Well, another funny thing about numbers is that we have totally nuts agreement rules. One of these rules, for example, is that if the number is greater than 3 but less than 11, it must take the opposite gender of the noun that it represents. So if we assume that car is a female, you would have to use the male form of the number if you're counting 3 to 11 cars. 3 to 10 cars. This is kind of strange, yes. So actually it brings me now to the phonetics part of the language, which I think is the most difficult thing about the language. Arabic is kind of a normal language, but the problem is mostly with the phonetics, because we have normal consonants like S and K, Sin and Kaf in Arabic, but you also have some kind of a heavier companion to them. So for S, we have Sad, Sin, Sad, and for K, Kaf, we have Qaf, which comes from the top of the throat and the bottom of the tongue. It's a little awkward to pronounce and more awkward to let it flow through sentences and phrases. I think this is the most difficult thing for foreigners learning the language. So speaking of consonants, Arabic has 28 consonants. It has 8 vowels that are represented via diacritics. Basically, what we do is that we represent the motion of a certain letter through these diacritics. So here, for example, if we are to pronounce the word Washington, we would put this sign below that sh sound. This is a letter in Arabic to say that we want to say a she, not a sho, not a sha, but a Washington. We would put a sign on the end to say that we want to pivot here, washin, and then we're going to pivot and then do something else. And then we put a sign over the T to mean that we need toe, not a ta, not a T, but a toe. And the same, it goes like that. Same thing with Canada here on the other side. We put something at the top to indicate that we mean ka. So this becomes Canada. This is how we would write it in Arabic. And now it brings me also to one problematic thing about Arabic is these tashkil signs. The diacritics are called tashkil. Basically, sometimes when they're written in a newspaper or a novel, actually they don't write the signs, the diacritics, and you are left to understand which word it is from the context. Sometimes it can be easy, sometimes it can be complicated. Here, for example, we have the word, the root kataba to write, and the word kutub, which actually now I can show you that they are both actually the same. Without the diacritics, they are written the same, but we have to have the diacritics to know whether we would say kataba or kutub. So, of course, like from the context, you can tell these apart, but there are some cases which can be a little confusing. Another silly thing that we have is that Arabic doesn't really, most of the time, it doesn't really have a word order. Something like, I saw him yesterday, you would say, أنا رأيته بالأمس. You could also switch most combinations of this word, which actually has been a great problem for us in the course, because we have to input, for every sentence, we have to input like 7 or 8 possible combinations or word orders, I mean. So أنا رأيته بالأمس could be رأيته أنا بالأمس, بالأمس أنا رأيته, أنا بالأمس رأيته, and so on. Of course, some of these might have more emphasis than others, but the fact remains that you can use all of this in a very normal sentence, and it's correct. So that was the differences, or like crazy things. What are the similarities to other languages? Well, Arabic is a gendered language, like German and French and Spanish, but we have 2 genders. It's objects or things are either male or female. We have 3 cases, nominative, genitive, and accusative. We don't have the dative case. the normal form of like to use we are kind of like English, and the way English says like this scares me, this pleases me, this worries me, we also say that like something does something upon you. German is kind of like that, but only in das gefällt mir, I think. um, Something also that has been really incredible for me to find out is that Arabic has kind of similar complex constructs as other languages. Like if you would translate the sentence, I would have said yes, into Arabic, it would be almost a one-to-one translation of the individual words, which is really amazing that people living on an island in Europe come to the same logical linguistic conclusion as some people living in a desert in like southeast part of the world somehow. It's really incredible. Like it really proves to me that we are one. We are the same thing basically. Arabic, well, not Arabic. Well, the world's languages have also borrowed a lot of words from Arabic. Some of the most famous things are lemon. The Arabic word is laymoon. Also, algebra, the mathematical branch of science. Basically, the Arabic word is al-gabr. Also, the word tariff, we say tarifa in Arabic. Um, Currently, because also the dialects are a living, breathing thing, and we live in a connected world, the dialects also borrow a lot from foreign languages. Like in Egypt, we have to use a lot of English and French and Italian words. Like all the car parts, we use the French words, I think, like carburateur or something like that. We use the word gelati for ice cream sometimes, which is very similar to gelato, the Italian word, if I'm not mistaken. We use a lot of English words. It's basically like student union association. Sometimes we say these things as they are in English. Also, Tunisian has a lot of integrated French vocabulary as well, due to the nature of like the living, breathing dialect thing. So, which brings me to my final 2 points now. So that was Arabic, and how could you learn it then? What would you need to do to learn Arabic? Basically, learning Arabic is almost like learning another language, surprisingly. But the problem is you have to do a couple of things to get, like, before putting the first step in. Basically, you have to decide why you are learning Arabic, or basically which Arabic you want to learn. The standard Arabic, do you want to learn for the Quran? Do you want to learn for a dialect? Do you want to learn to read newspapers? Because setting your goal would define the way you approach the learning of the language. Because if you want to learn it to read the Quran, this is a totally different kind of branch, because you need to learn poetry, you need to understand the intricacies of the language just to understand, to read newspapers, something like that. This is an easier branch. Just to the dialects, this is also a different branch, so on. You also need to practice writing and reading and pronouncing the script, because it's right to left, it's a little confusing. It's not confusing, it's just something new that you need to practice writing and reading, and you need to be able to pronounce the letters as well. This is something that you need to do. The final thing that you need to do as well, if you're a classical person like me that loves like written dictionaries, actual book dictionaries, I mean, you have to learn how to read an Arabic dictionary, because dictionaries in Arabic are sorted by the verb roots, not like by the order of alphabetical order of words, but by the verb roots. So say, for example, the verb kataba, KTB, to write, assume it's right. So under right, you will find everything related to it, like writer, written, book, table, desk. You will find everything related to this root under the root. So you look for a word's meaning through its root. And then after that, it's a very normal language learning process. You learn grammar, you learn sentences, you do exercises. It's a very normal process after that, after these 3 steps. Which actually brings me again to the point of Duolingo and Arabic. I think, personally, that Duolingo is actually made for Arabic, because that's actually what Sibawayh does. What Sibawayh did, he had his hourly ways, as I call it. Basically, he just was presented with thousands of sentences of Arabic, and through them he saw the patterns of grammar, and then he wrote them down. And this is exactly what Duolingo does. Duolingo gives you thousands of sentences, and you translate them back and forth. You realize the grammar, you just soak in the patterns of the grammar and understand it without having the rules explained to you. Moreover than that, we could simply explain the grammar rules in like normal tooltips and stickies in the forums. And also, we don't have a problem with the word order, because we would input these ourselves. And through the playing around with the word order, you would get a feeling of what is the correct word order, and when it is right to flip the word order or not. What we would also currently do in the current system actually is we could use alphabet lessons, like we could treat letters as if they are image exercises. However, what we need, I think, more, currently, like additionally to the current system, is some kind of custom free write lesson or something, so that we explain more about the script of the language and how it's written and when the letters are connected or not. Because I think these things are also important in like learning how to write it, because the standard Arabic is a written language after all. So we would love to have some kind of free platform to free write lesson platform to explain how the language is written or presented. Yeah, and the last thing I would like to tell you about is perhaps a couple of cool, useful phrases about Arabic. Perhaps some of you already know them. So basically, to say hello in the standard Arabic, we say marhaban. To say thanks, we say shukran, which is literally shukran, shukran. To say how are you, you can simply say kayf al-hal, which literally means like how is the state. It sounds like yo, but yeah. Uh, Anyway, to say my name is, you say ismi. So my name is Usama, ismi Usama. And these are like really cool and really light. There are more difficult examples, but yeah, these will do. And thank you.